we'll get started. A couple of housekeeping things. If anyone has any cell phones on them, they want to turn those to vibrate or silent. The restrooms are down the hall on the right before you get to the front desk. And just to kind of set your expectations, I anticipate the performance, including Q&A, to last anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour or so. Okay, and you're going to leave the way you came. I want to thank Jason from Tewksbury Telemedia for being here and filming tonight's performance. Don't worry, the camera will be focused on the performer, so you're safe, you're safe. Also, of course, want to thank the Friends of the Library who sponsor all our programs here at the library for adults, teens, and kids. We're a very active programming library. We run one, sometimes two programs a day for adults, and it wouldn't be possible without the generosity of the Friends of the Library. And rather than plug an event, I just want to let folks know that starting tomorrow, the March calendar will be at the front desk. And for those who are on our email newsletter, you'll be receiving information about all the March programs tomorrow. So keep an eye on your email inbox. All right? With that, all I'll say is it's my understanding that we'll be joined by a special guest very soon. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound. I can't go anyplace till you shake my hand, sis. Thank you. Sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I am found. Was blind, but now I see. Good evening. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear the hour I first believed. Thank you, ma'am. I don't know how you're going to feel after I finish saying what I get to say, so hold it. When I was a slave, I hated white people. You see, we was all brought over from Africa. My father, my mother, and I, and a lot more of us, and we was sold up and down, hither and yon. I can remember when I was a little bit of a thing, no bigger than this, how my old mama would come outdoors in the evening, sit down, look up at the stars, and moan. Mama, what makes you moan so? I'm moaning because I don't know where my children be, and they don't know where I be. Now, I look up at the stars, and they look up at the same stars, and I can't tell where they be. One day, child, you may be sold away from your mama and have great troubles come upon you. When these troubles come, you go to God. He lives in the sky, and he'll hear and answer every prayer you make. Well, children, I did get sold. I was 10 years old, and that was when my war begun, because my master and missus was hard. Woo! I tell you, they was hard. It appeared like I couldn't please them no how. One day, Master called me into the barn, shackled me down, and beat me with rods that had been heated in a fire. Oh, sister, I bear the marks even today. And when I hear them talk now of beating women in their bare flesh, it makes my flesh crawl and my every hair on my head rise. That was 1 year. I stayed with the next master for another year. I stayed with the last master for 17 years when he promised me he would free me 1 year before slaves was due to be free in New York State. Now that was in 1825. In 1820s, in 1826, I was still his slave. Oh, these slaveholders are terrible for promising you this and that. Oh, if you will do thus and so. And yet, when one claims that promise, they recall nothing of the kind. And you were taunted with being a liar. Oh, God, I've been asking you to make my master and Mrs. better, but you don't. Now, what can be the reason? Lord, if you came to me and asked me for my help, and I'd give you everything I have. Why don't you help me? Perhaps you can't. I'm tired of talking to God and praying. It doesn't do me any good. Oh. I'll make a bargain with you. You help me to get away from them, and I promise I will be good. And if you don't help me, well, I don't believe I can. The Lord spoke to me, told me to get up and start off 2 or 3 hours before daylight. Well, children, I got up at 3 in the morning and traveled so fast, but by the time the sun rose, I was clear away from the place and out of sight. And then I realized I did not know where to go. Oh, Lord, I want to thank you for starting me out on this journey, but please give me some direction. The Lord made a house appear to me in my head, told me I was to walk on till I seen that house and asked the folks to take me in. Well, I traveled all day, and I seen that house late at night. I went in and told the folks they was Quakers. The Lord has sent me. They took me in. Those Quakers, they treated me as kind as if I'd been one of them. And after they give me supper, they took me to a room with a great white bed in it and told me I was to sleep there. Children, I was scared to be alone. I had never slept in a bed before. When I was a slave to Mr. Van Ottenberg, me and my family used to sleep on the damp boards of a dirt cellar with a little straw and maybe one blanket to keep us all warm. Those Quakers, they saw me as a child of God, not something less than a beast. Well, I stayed with them for a couple of years. I wasn't crazy. And instead of keeping my promise, I forgot all about God. I figured everything was going all right. I did not need the help. I just give up on praying. I think you know what I'm talking about, huh? Mm-hmm. And our pastor in New York State said colored folks there was all free. Old master come to the house and asked me, didn't I want to go back to the old place to see my children and the folks there? Now, you know I said, yes, sir. And just as I was I met God. I turned right around. I come back in. I could see. I was so wicked. I could feel it. Hot, burning all around. Who is this? And then, child, for a while, it was like the sun shining in a pail of water. I begun to feel it was somebody who loved me. I tried to know him. I know you. and I don't know you. I know you. This is Jesus. Glory be to God. And the whole world grew bright. Trees waved in glory. Every piece of stone on the ground, well, it shone like a piece of glass. I've begun to feel a love in my heart, a love for all creatures, and all of a sudden it stopped. A voice spoke out in me. Now, what about the white folks that have beat you and abused you and beat and abused your people? Now, what about them? And all of a sudden, another rush of love run through me. Oh, God, I can love even the white folks. My name was Isabella. But when I left the house of bondage, children, I left everything behind. I wanted none of Egypt on me. I went to the Lord and I asked him for a new name. And he gave me Sojourner, because I was to travel up and down the land, being a sign unto people, showing them their sins. And I asked the Lord for another name. Everybody else has too. And he gave me Truth, because I was to declare truth to the people. Through many dangers, toils and snares, I have already come. 'Twas grace that brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me home. Well, after that, you see, I thought I would go back to the old place to see my children and the folks. Law had passed in New York State, said colored folks there was all free. And when I got back, they told me my old missus had given my son Peter to her married daughter who lived in Alabama. I went right up to see old missus. Mrs., have you been sent my son to Alabama? How could you do it? She laughed.
Oh, what a fuss you make over one paltry nigger. You've got more of them than you know what to do with.
Mrs., I will have my son back again.
And how you gonna do it? You nigger, you haven't got any money.
No, Mrs., I haven't. But the Lord has, and he'll help me. You'll see. I turned and left. Our Lord, render unto her double. And it come true. I carried my case to the grand jury. The Quakers helped me gather money for Peter's returned children. I felt so strong within. I felt as if the power of a nation was with me, and they found Peter. They found Peter, and his holders tried to frighten him and had him say in the courtroom that I was not his mama, that he did not know me. Oh, Lord, you can make the people do for me, and you must make the people do for me. Lord, make them hear me. I will never give you peace until you do. Well, Peter was returned to me, and I carried him home, and I come to take off his clothes, and there was his little back, all covered with scars and hard lumps where they'd flogged him. But my Lord, my Lord, he heard me. I come to find out, my old missus, what gave my Peter to her daughter, she lost her child. As the daughter's husband threw his wife down and stomped the life out of her when he was in liquor.
Oh, Lord.
Lord, now I did not mean all that. You took me up too quick. Pure city, Babylon's fallen to rise no more. Pure city, Babylon's fallen to rise no more. Oh, Babylon's fallen, fallen, fallen. Babylon's fallen to rise no more. Oh, Babylon's fallen, fallen, fallen. Babylon's fallen to rise no more. I journeys round to camp meetings and I sings, and folks always come up around me, and then I preach to them. I tell them about Jesus and the sins of these people. And a great many folks come to hear me too. Say they want to hear me again. Now, I journeyed to New York City, but sister, you know that everything that they say about their town is true. The rich do rob the poor, and the poor, they rob each other. Now, I journeyed to Long Island, Connecticut, Springfield, Massachusetts. Lord always saw to it I was able to find the work to tide me over. Now, when I preach, I preach from just one text, how I found Jesus. Let me share something with you, children. Sojourner cannot read a book, but I can read people. Now Jesus told you once before, Babylon's fallen to rise no more, to go in peace and sin no more. Babylon's fallen to rise no more. Oh, Babylon's fallen, fallen, fallen. Babylon's fallen to rise no more. Oh, Babylon's fallen, fallen, fallen. Babylon's fallen to rise no more. I sat down for a while in Northampton, Massachusetts. Lived with the association there. Any of you know how we made our way? Jason, did I just ask these people a question? I'm going to try asking another question. What century are you all in? What century are you all in? The 21st. Well, seems I come from the 19th century, and seems to me when somebody call out a question, you get an answer. Now, you all used to go to school, right? Teacher would call out a question, you're supposed to answer, right? Let's pretend we're in school, because I believe in the 21st century you would call this kind of performance maybe interactive. And I haven't got any interact yet. So if I don't have any interact, we don't go any further than this. So let's try that again, all right? I think you would call that take two. I sat down for a while in Northampton, Massachusetts, and lived with the association there. Here it comes. Anybody know how we made our way?
Wagon.
Excuse me? Oh, now you all been brave, you answered. And isn't it funny about English that one phrase can be used for different things? So you interpreted making our way transportation. But some of us know, and you know too, when we talk about make our way, we could talk about how we made our living. Because that's a trick. No, honey, I'm talking about how I made my living. And it's a trick question because none of you would have guessed that in Florence, which is a suburb of Northampton, Massachusetts, if that's possible, we were raising silkworms. Weaving silk for 10 to 12 hours a day. I normally worked in the laundry, but we all worked for that princely sum of 7 cents an hour so we could pay our 50 cents room and board. Well, we worked hard there, and it was there that I had good times. But I'll tell you, it was there that I met Mr. William Lloyd Garrison and Mr. Frederick Douglass, those great abolitionists. But you know, sometimes I had to bring Mr. Frederick Douglass to God's word. Well, some of you know Frederick, huh? Well, I tell you, that man, we were talking in Salem, Ohio, And we were talking about these injustices done to our people. Well, the more that man talked, the more excited he became. He finally becomes so agitated that he prophesied, justice would never come to our people. We must be prepared to pick up arms and shed blood. I could stay silent no longer. The Lord would not let me. Frederick, Mr. Frederick Douglass. Frederick, answer one question for me. Just one question. Frederick, has God died? As I said, we worked hard there, but we had good times. And do you know, some folks called us infidels? Children, I wish the world were filled with such infidels. Please remember this for Sojourner. Religion without humanity, that is pure human stuff. Throw that away. Association closed after 2 years, but I liked Northampton. I liked that town and the people, so I bought my first home and land there. And, honey, let me tell you, to make up for that $300 mortgage that was about to break my pocketbook, I took to the road again, traveling and then preaching. I sold my shadow. Anybody here have an entrepreneurship, supporting themselves and the family, selling a shadow? Excuse me? No. Oh, thank you. You've been trained. This, children, is my shadow. My photograph on a postcard. It tells folks I sells the shadow to support the substance. I dare say I've sold a few too many for my own good. Youngster, come here. Next to me, I'm 68. You're a youngster. Come here. But just, I said you, not the coat. Come here, come here, come here, come here. You get to really interact. It's not that bad. Okay. What's your name? Sarah. What? Sarah. I'm going to say it loud, Sarah. This is Sarah. Sarah's a brave woman. Sarah, do you ever forget things?
Yes.
I do too. And I'm older, so I have a good excuse. That I sometimes forget to take this with me. Okay. So you get to look at it first. You do not have to walk with it. People will pass it around with each other, but when I'm done, please try to remember to bring it back to me. You get to look at it first. Okay. Stay up here with me for a minute, okay? Can you handle it?
Yes.
You're doing, much better. We can hear you now. This is a picture of the real Sojourner. The real Sojourner was 6 feet tall. I was originally 5'7" ¾ I probably shrunk. So tall, skinny, with a voice. You notice her voice is a little deeper than mine. Her voice was very deep. She brooked no nonsense. I've got all sorts of pictures here. This picture, she finished out her life in Battle Creek, Michigan. And this is a picture. Michigan has a museum devoted to itself. And then I found this picture in their museum. On the back is my favorite picture of her. Do any of you read the Globe and read Rhymes with Orange? Well, it's a great comic strip by a woman named Hilary Price, who happens to live in Northampton, and I got a comic strip about Sojourner Truth in here. And a picture that I clipped of her out of the Globe. In Northampton, right across the street from a church, there is a statue of Sojourner. And some of you may know, Sojourner wanted more than anything in the world to be able to vote. She was never able to get that chance. But the last time we voted here in Massachusetts, somebody hung a sash around Sojourner, and when people came out, they put their I voted stickers on her. So, Sarah, you get the first look, then you pass it around, okay?
Okay.
I'll be talking to you later.
Okay.
That wasn't so bad, was it? And you're a beautiful girl. Oh, and polite, too. Let me take another sip of tea, then we'll continue. I also sold my autobiography, which I dictated to a dear friend of mine, Miss Olive Gilbert. It was signed by a great many people. Miss Harriet Beecher Stowe. Anybody know the name of that book that woman wrote? I was never able to read it. Now, like I said, I was never able to read it, but I hear it started a mess of trouble in these here United States. And my book was signed, honey, I forgot to tell you, don't go into it. That's okay, just put everything back in and close it up. Thank you very much. Because what's in there is another script, okay? It was signed by Harriet Beecher Stowe and President Abraham Lincoln. I met him September 29th, 1864 at the White House. I was escorted into his office. He arose, took my hand, and made a bow. Pleased to meet you. Oh, Mr. President, when you took office, I thought that you would be torn into pieces. Oh, I liken you unto Daniel, who was thrown into the lion's den. I knew that if they did not tear you to pieces, it would be that God had sent you. I appreciate you, sir. I think you're the best man to ever take the office. He smiled and said, well, I expect you were making some reference to my proclamation, having emancipated the slaves. But I would never have done that, he said, if the folks across the Potomac had behaved themselves, but they did not. And they gave me the opportunity to do these things. Well, sir, I thank God and the people that you were the instrument selected by him. I should be ashamed to say this, but I had never heard of you before you come to the White House. He smiled and said, well, Auntie Sojourner, I had heard of you many times before this. I presented him with one of my shadows, for which he most graciously thanked me, and I am pleased to say that I was never treated by anyone with more kindness and cordiality than that great good man, Mr. Lincoln. I felt as if I was in the presence of a friend. I am pleading for my people, a poor downtrodden race who dwell on freedom's boasted land with no abiding place. I am pleading for the mothers that gaze in dark despair upon the dreaded auction block and see their babies there. Though I bear upon my body the scars of many a gash, I am pleading for my people who groan beneath the lash. I lingered a while in Washington. The National Freedmen's Relief Association appointed me counselor, and I went among the freedmen and women in their camps in Arlington, Virginia. They all wanted to learn how we lived in the North. They were all delighted to hear me speak. I think I did some good there. God knows I was needed. Now, the white folks got the fishes and the loaves, the freedmen and women, the scales and the crust. Did you know that in the colored home in Maryland, they did not even know that they had been free for a year? Nobody ever told them. One old sister clung around my neck. She liked to choke me. She was so thrilled when she got the news. Now, I didn't calculate to ask the government for anything, only what I had to eat. For black folks must be raised out of bondage. All the gold in California, all the wealth of this nation could not restore to us what white folks have wrested away. Now, as I said, I lingered a while in Washington, and one afternoon I'm traveling with a dear friend of mine, Miss Josephine Giddens, General Relief Agent for the Freedmen's Relief Association. Trolley refused to stop for me. Now, I've been following Josephine quite closely, had grabbed a hold of that iron rail, and this trolley proceeded to drag me for a few yards before Joseph, please, convince the conductor to stop. Well, we got the name of that conductor. And after we approached the president of the city railway, there was a conductor without a job. And I was advised that in the future, whenever I had any mishaps on the city railway, to get the name of the conductor, the number of his trolley, and report those two pieces of information back to the president of the city railway. And I thought surely there would be no more trouble. Just a few weeks later, I'm traveling with Laura Haviland of Michigan, getting ready to go to the Freedmen's Hospital. They're doing going for lunch, no advising and counsel. Now, that day we was bringing some blackberry wine and I went to step up on the platform of this trolley. Conductor come out and said, "Step off! Get away from here!" Do you all know me well enough by now to know that I told that conductor I was not about to step off? He said, "Well then, I'll put cut you off. And he grabbed my right shoulder, oh, with such violence and force. I thought for a minute the man was about to succeed. Laura tried talking to him. Does she belong to you, he asked. Sir, she said, she does not belong to me. Sir, she belongs to humanity. What two pieces of information do you think we had when we left that trolley that day? And so armed, we approached the president of the city railway again, and guess, there was another miscreant conductor without a job. And I was advised to have said miscreant arrested. My shoulder was dislocated in that fray, and I've already told you I'm an old lady. I'm pleased to tell you he was brought to trial under Justice Thompson. You know, people down here in Washington say, oh, Sojourner, this slaveholding spirit dies hard. Well, I'm here to tell you that die it must. And I'm also pleased to tell you the next time I stepped up into a trolley in Washington, District of Columbia, the conductors were saying, step up, ladies, to women like us. And when I stepped in, it looked like pepper and salt, the way it should. My time, thank you. My time in Washington was over. And I'm going to tell you the truth, I don't know who was happier about that. Me or Washington, District of Columbia. Either way, we parted happily. I took to the road again, traveling again and preaching again, but this time it was a little different. This time I was talking about slavery, why it should not be, and the rights of women, why they had to be. Children, I am against slavery because I want to keep white slaveholders from getting sent to hell. Oh, we hear a great deal of talk about love at home with a family. Children, I was a slave, and my husband and child was sold from me. And what has become of the affection that I held for them? We hear a great deal about the Constitution and the rights of man, and oh, it looks mighty big. I feel around for my rights, and they're not there. I asked the Lord, Lord, what else is Constitution? You know what he tells me? Sojourner, it's got a little weevil in it. Who made your skin white? Was it not God? Yes. And who made mine black? Was it not the same God? Children, get rid of your prejudice. Learn to love black children so that we all may be children of our Father in heaven. Well, my friends, I am rejoiced that you are glad, but I do not know how you will feel when I am through. You see, I come from another country. I come from the field of the slave. So much good luck that they have their partial liberty. Well, I want to see slavery root and branch destroyed, for only then shall we all be free indeed. I feel that if I have to answer for the deeds done in my body just as much as a man, I have a right to have just as much as a man. Now, there is a great stir going on about the colored men getting their rights, and not a word about the colored women getting theirs. Now, if the men's get their rights and not the women theirs, sisters, you know it'll be just as bad as before, with the men being masters over the women. And I am for keeping the thing stirring while it's going, because if we wait, it'll take a great while to get things going again. Now, I want you to consider on that children. Now, I call you all children because, well, you are somebody's child, and God knows tonight I feel old enough to be mother of you all. But what is all this racket about? Well, there's so much racket. There must be something out of kilter. I think that twixt the white women of the North and the South and the niggers of the South all asking for their rights, the white man is going to be in a fix pretty soon. Now that man over there, he says that women need to be helped into carriages and lifted over ditches and given the best place everywhere. Well, no one's ever helped me into a carriage or lifted me over a ditch or given me the best place anywhere. And ain't I a woman? Look at me. Look at my arm. I have plowed and planted and gathered into barns, and no man could head me. And ain't I a woman? I could work as hard and eat as much as man when I could get it, and bear the lash as well. And ain't I a woman? But what is all this here talk about, this talk in the head? What do they call it? The intellect. What has that got to do with women wanting their rights and niggas needing theirs? Now, if my cup won't hold but a pint and yours a quart, wouldn't you seem mean not to let me have my little half measure full? Now that man in the black over there, he says that women can have as much rights as man because Christ was not a woman. Sir, where did your Christ come from? Where did your Christ come from? From God and a woman. Man had nothing to do with it. Now, if the first woman that God made was strong enough to turn the world upside down all alone, well, these here ought to be able to turn it right side up again. And now that we is asking to do it, you men better let us. He says, I need help, that man over there, to step across the watercourse to pull out my own chair. And he says, I always need to have the best place everywhere because I'm a woman. Well, no one's ever carried me or gave me the best place or helped me into carriages or over the mill race. No, no one's ever done for me. But look at me now to my face. And ain't I a woman? Look at me, look at my arm. I have plowed and planted and gathered into barns, and no one there beside me could work as hard or last as long. And ain't I a woman? Ain't I a woman? 13 children I have born and raised, and seen most all of them sold off as slaves. And when I cried out in my mother's grief and rage, none but God did hear me. I have borne the burden, I can bear the lash as well. I'll stand on no more auction blocks or other pedestals. I do as much, I want as much. There ain't nothing more to tell. And ain't I a woman? Ain't I a woman? Ain't I a woman? Children, I am mighty obliged to you for hearing old Sojourner speak. But you know, there ain't nothing more to tell. Have a blessed evening. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you. All right.
That was great.
Thank you. Okay, let me introduce myself. My name is Kathryn Woods. I'm an actor from Boston. Somebody gave me a comment, but if you've got any comments, criticism, questions that you'd like to ask me, throw them over here. But I'm going to ask you to speak up loud enough so everybody can hear, because if you don't, I'm going to tell you to do that again.
Where do you work in Boston?
I'll sell you beer at Fenway Park after April 2nd, and I guide tours on the Freedom Trail. I have an African American Patriots Trail tour coming up on Saturday, I think. So That's what I do. Endless.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Excuse me? Thank you. Thank you. God's gift. Thank you. I paid a voice teacher a lot of money to keep it, but God gave it to me. And I went to school with nuns. You know how it is when you go to school with nuns and you start singing? Let me tell you, you go to school with nuns and you start singing Gregorian chant, they tell you, this is what the note's looks like, this is what it better sound like. I'm going to sing it to you once, you better give it back to me right the second time. Any other questions or comments back there?
Do you do any other plays besides this one?
No, this is the only one I do. I'm lazy. I keep saying I'm going to do Fannie Lou Hamer, but I haven't gotten around to it yet. It's been a few years. About 19.
How long have you been doing this?
Since about 1990, 1991. She has been seen in 43 states. I'm archived on C-SPAN. I have performed in presidential libraries. I performed at Mills College. I performed in Frank Lloyd Wright churches. So I would do on a street corner if I thought I was going to make some money. And if push comes to shove, if I have to, I will. Anything else? Okay, I can't hear you, so stand up and speak up, sis.
Can you tell us about the research that you've done?
When I started doing the research, this was in 1989, and there weren't very many good books about Sojourner out, because there are a lot of good books about her now. But back then, there was a book written by a woman. It's funny, I started doing some research when I started doing this again last year. One book was written by a woman who wasn't even in this country, and it was a lot of what Sojourner thought. I hate biographies that tell me what you're thinking, because you don't know. There weren't very many good books. The book that helped me a lot was written by a woman, I think it was her thesis, and it was called Victoria Ortiz, and it was Sojourner Truth, a self-made woman. I could not find her autobiography because when people meet Sojourner Truth, they're so enchanted by her, they take her out of the library, they don't bring her back. I went to the Schlesinger Library, which was at Radcliffe, so the woman's side of Harvard. I'm old enough to remember when it was Radcliffe. But it's a research library mostly dealing with women's issues at Harvard. She was supposed to be there. She wasn't. She wasn't. It was, I had gotten past my deadline. I'm a lazy cuss. I was supposed to go to the South End branch to work on it. The South End branch was closed for lunch, and I went to the Central branch, the Central Boston Public Library, and went up in the stacks, and they didn't let her go out of the stack. So I had her for 3 days. So what you hear now is what I could do back then. I think I could do better now, but what you're hearing now is out of her autobiography, and in that autobiography, the interview that she did with Harriet Beecher Stowe. And it's called Interview with the Libyan Sibyl. And Harriet Beecher Stowe goes for all the black, the dialect, all that mess. And sometimes some untruths too, but with Sojourner had a sort of mythology grow up around her, and she didn't mind contributing to her mythology. There's a book out now about her by Nell Irvin Painter, and it's called, do you know the book I'm talking about? It's called Sojourner Truth, A Life and a Symbol. And Painter, who's a real scholar, talks about the discrepancy between the mythology and the reality. And when I said the Ain't I a Woman speech, that's not the speech that she gave. What you heard was something that was transcribed 12 years after the fact by a white woman. I believe her name was Frances Gage, who was a poet, and you can hear that in the speech that I gave to you. That's why I picked it, because it almost has a pentameter. It's got that beat. It's got Ain't I a Woman. You can keep going back to it. If you read, I forget the brother's name, but he was the secretary at that convention, and he transcribed her words. A woman ain't I don't come into it at all. At one point she asked, and aren't I a woman? People like her mythology. And when Nell Irvin Painter brought this up before a meeting of scholarly women, most of the scholarly women said they like the sassy version of Sojourner. So the way I justify doing this, the version of her that might not be as true as she was, is that a lot of people don't know of her. And after they've met her here, maybe they will go do the research and do more research and find out the reality. Another book that came out, I think it came out in 1996. It's called, oh God, I forget. Sojourner Truth is in the title, but Carlton Mabee, M-A-B-E-E, and his daughter Susan Mabee Newhouse put it together. But there have been other books that have come out since then. But when I was doing that research in 1989, bad.
Where was she born?
Where was she born? She was born in New Paltz, New York, in Ulster County. And people are like, New York? Dutch people? And I go, Indonesia. Wasn't Indonesia all about slavery? Yeah, everybody had slaves. She was raised, yeah, because that was their first master, Van Aardenburg. The last master was Mr. Dumont. Yeah, she was raised in New York. She was the first person, when she sued to get her little boy back, she got him back because it was against the law in New York State to sell anybody under the age of 11 out of state. He had been originally sold to someone who took him to New York City and found that little 6-year-old Peter couldn't take care of all his needs. So then he brought him back to upstate New York, and the mother-in-law sold him to down south. So that's the only reason. She was the first black person to take a case to the grand jury and win. Take a case to the grand jury and win. When she went to New York City, she liked to join religious communes. And she joined a commune that was run by this dude named Matthias. Thought he was the new Jesus, and everybody else around him did, except that was his excuse to mess around. And somebody ought to be dead. And Matthias was taken to trial, and at one point, he wanted to talk mess about Isabella. I don't think she was Sojourner yet. I think she might have still been Isabella. She took his backside to court for slander and won. Got $200 off his backside. Mm-hmm. Honey, don't ask me about no years. I'll tell you when she was born, and I'll tell you the date she died. Don't ask me about nothing in between. 1797, 1883. So she was 86 when she died. When she died, she finished out her life in Battle Creek, Michigan. She like I said, she liked religious communes, so she lived originally in a commune in Harmonium, Michigan, but eventually got the money she bought an old barn, and she tricked out the barn and lived in the barn.
Did she ever have any other relationships with her 12 children?
She didn't have 12 children, or 13. She had 5 children.
Oh, wow.
And I think I dropped that during the A9 woman speech, because I was like, I think I dropped that, and I'm pretty sure I did. She had Peter, Diana, Elizabeth, I'm forgetting one girl's name, and Hannah probably, and Hannah was born and died shortly thereafter. So she had those 4 children. When she got Peter back, remember when she says all the slaves in New York were free? So they had a kind of emancipation proclamation in New York State. Oh, honey, now you know they're not going to let people free just willy-nilly. They're going to get some work off of you. So they're going to tell people, if you're born a slave, when you're 21, you cannot be a slave anymore. We're going to get some work off of you. And that was the case with her children, with her daughters. So she couldn't take her daughters with her when she went to New York City, but she took Peter with her. Now, we all know now that when you get beaten so bad, your mind takes a lot of hits, right? Your body takes the hits, your mind takes the hits. Now, this boy was beaten so bad that he said he was beaten so bad that the mistress, he slept under the house. That's where his place of sleeping was. And when he would go to bed at night, mistress would come down out of the house after everybody was asleep to rub balm in his back. So his back was messed up. Remember how she said she could see the marks? So if the marks were on his body, just imagine what was going on in his head. She take him to New York City, and Peter don't want to act right. And she wants to train the boy. She wants him to go to school. She says, when Peter learned that he could dance and sing, he'd much rather do that than go to school. So she and a friend of hers, they got him a job, probably being a coachman or something like that, something where he had to go get a uniform, his livery. He went and got the uniform, sold that and some of the master's goods. So Peter was starting to be a little wild child. A little wild child. And she said she did not know how to deal with him. She says, I talked to him, I tried to talk to him, I tried to talk. It seemed to do no good. So the next time he got caught, and he was put in, it's a jail in New York, they call it the Tombs, right? The Tombs have been going on for a long time because they threw Peter in the Tombs. Just imagine how nasty those things are now. So they threw Peter in the Tombs. He reached out to his mama. Mama said, Mama didn't know who he was. She said she was tired of talking. She wasn't talking no more. So he reached out to a man, a black man, who'd schooled the little black rapscallions in naval craft. Back in the day, working on a ship was the most lucrative trade for a black man. Hard work. Really hard work, but it got you off of the land and it got you work. He would train them. So he gets a job doing that. He asked his mother, come with me to meet this man, Mama. And so Sojourner goes, she says, I wasn't too, because she said, I didn't think he existed. Because Peter telling all his stories. Well, imagine her surprise when that man was a reality. She was really surprised. And Peter did ship off to work on I think a whaling ship. It was called the Zone. She was never able to read, but she always had somebody to read to her. And he sent a few letters back. The last letter he sent back, he was like, hey, Ma, how you doing? I'll be coming home in whatever time. And he never came home. So all that she went through to get him back, she lost him again with absolutely no closure, because nowadays, it's hard for us to think that somebody don't know what we're up to, right? Because you can always tell what we're up to. We're always leaving a marker. There's always something watching us. When I used to tell that to kids, when I would go into elementary schools, the kids these days, they can't understand not being able to be found. They don't understand that. So she lost Peter all over again. Her daughters eventually came to live with her in Michigan. If you look and find a picture of her standing with Lincoln, that's not her, that's one of her daughters. Because they made that picture after the fact. There was somebody else back there? Did I see? Ma'am? Oh, okay. Anything else?
Why aren't you on Broadway? You're fabulous.
Well, if you didn't notice, I'm fat, I'm old, and I can't dance for crap.
But you can sing.
Oh yeah, I can sing. But I tell you what, even back when I was in school, they'd want you to, well, I can move and sing, but don't give me a dance and tell me dance and sing. I did a show, it went to Russia. It was talking about the women who worked in the naval yards, and especially the Charlestown Naval Yard, back where I'm from in Boston. And the choreographer, after a while, said, Kathy, when you hear this note, start moving. When you hear this note, stop moving. Because I couldn't count it out. I couldn't count it out. But she said, you know how to move, so just move down to there, move back up here, and when you hear this note, just stop. So I'm a choreographer's nightmare. I mean, I used to work the 11 to 7 at Children's Hospital on the switchboard, so real quiet. And when I got my equity card, there was I was an understudy, but I had to learn a dance. And I would work that dance from 2 to 5. I'd get it once or twice. It wouldn't matter. I'm just not good at that. I'm not good at that. Anything else? All right, everybody? I think we're free to leave the room. Have a good day. Carol, that wasn't so hard, was it? Come on, honey. I want you to get used to being on a stage.
Thank you, baby. Thank you very much. Thank you. Take care. Thank you.